Good morning, everybody. Welcome to English this morning. I hope that you're safe and well. It is the climax of Varjak Paul this morning. We are going to read the last two chapters and start to prepare ourselves for the final piece of work writing that we're going to be doing this week. Okay, so our what we're going to do to begin with is start on chapter 34 and 35 of Varjak Paul. You will need to find chapter 34 in your ebook. It's on page 242. Press pause while you're doing that and press play when you're ready to hear me read. Okay, so as I say, we're on to the climax, the final two chapters. Chapter 34. There was silence at the top of the stairs. The gentleman's cat was finished. Its body lay stiff and crumpled on the floor. It wasn't terrifying anymore. It looked like what it was, a broken toy. Varjak stood up shaking, exhausted. He couldn't believe he'd done it. With all his skills, he was no match for the black cats. He'd fought the fight of his life, yet the truth was they were better than real cats in almost every way. But they could never be alive like a real cat. That was their strength, but it was also their weakness. Somehow he'd made it count. The other black cat was staring at the broken toy as if it couldn't believe what had happened either. It nudged the crumpled body. There was no response, no movement, no life. It stood up very slowly and came towards Varjak. He knew what was coming. This one would never let him near its collar. It was going to avenge its twin. It was going to destroy him. And for all the world, he couldn't think how to stand against it. But it stopped just before it reached him and looked him in the eyes. For the first time, Varjak thought he saw a flicker of expression there. It looked sad, terribly, terribly sad. It wasn't fighting anymore. No, it was holding its neck out. It could beat him. It could beat anyone. But it was holding its neck out, as if it wanted him to cut its collar too. Varjak hesitated. After all this time, fearing and hating the black cats, he'd never thought they might have feelings of their own. But the two of them had always been like one, and now, without its other half, even the perfect fighting machine was useless. Varjak thought he understood. He leaned towards the black cat. It didn't move away, didn't resist. Very gently, he cut its collar. Its eyes widened for an instant, and then it too ground to a stop. It was over. He's done it! He's beaten them! Everyone was shouting now. We're free! Where was Holly? At that moment, she was all he could think of. Where was she? She'd figured it out, how to stop the cats. She was the one who'd done it. Kind of sad, those black cats, said a gravelly voice behind him. One couldn't work without the other. Varjak turned to face her, his heart aching. Would she forgive him? Holly, I'm sorry. I should have come with you. Her mustard eyes were smiling. I know, but you made up for it. Because you're not the worst friend in the world, Mr. Paul. Not by a long shot. They grinned at each other. Varjak, you did it, said Tam. She was breathless and her eyes were shining. I told her you could do it. Didn't I tell you, Holly? Tam, he said, it's so good to see you again. Cheers were going up. Some of the cats from the cage were starting to head downstairs. Wait, shouted Holly. Her gravelly voice stilled them instantly. It's not over yet, she warned. We have to find a way out. The house is all locked. All the windows, all the doors. So we've got to find another way. We're going down, but quietly. No one does anything unless we tell you to. We're not bossing you around. We just know what's going on here. Understand? There was a ripple of agreement. Varjak marveled at the way she took control. He smiled to himself as they led the cats down the stairs in a stealthy, silent collar. He had his friends back, both of them. They'd beaten the black cats. They'd done the impossible. After all he'd been through, maybe, just maybe, everything was going to come good at last. Varjak! Varjak! Help! He looked down. It was Julius howling. Julius in the gentleman's grip. The gentleman waiting for them at the foot of the stairs. The column of cats froze in fear. Varjak could see his family on the edge of the front room, trembling, powerless. They were all powerless before the gentleman. The black cats were gone, but they were nothing compared to the man who made them. Click, clack. The gentleman dropped Julius and stepped towards the stairs, shouting in a voice like thunder. The column of cats cracked and began to break. "Wait!" cried Holly, but no one was listening now. The street cats panicked, turned tail, fled upstairs. Julius scurried back to his family. In the space of a heartbeat, Varjak, Holly, and Tam stood alone as the gentleman came for them. His shadow stretched out before him. It covered the stairs, draping them in darkness even before he reached them. His shoes shone like black ice. As they clicked closer, step by step, Varjak could see his own reflection looming larger in their blackness. How could he let himself believe that everything could work out? He should have known better. He hated himself for having that moment of hope, because now the hope was gone. There was nothing left at all. "There's no way out, is there, Varjak?" said Tam. "No." "Looks like goodbye," said Holly. "We go down fighting?" "We go down fighting," said Varjak Paul. The gentleman's waxy white hand reached out for him, huge enough to hold his whole body, strong enough to break his neck. Varjak bared his teeth, ready to bite, to fight to the death. And it would be death. How else could it end? The hat closed around his neck, and crash! The smash of breaking glass, a roar like the sky ripping open. "Leave my friends alone!" And the hand let go. Varjak looked up to see the biggest, blackest monster in the world. Cludge! It was Cludge! The great dog had come through. He'd shattered the windows of the Contessa's house. Cludge was ferocious. Even Varjak shook at the sight of him. Cludge roared. The gentleman cowered. He backed away from the stairs, hands in the air, shaking with terror. It was something Varjak never expected to see. This almighty man, so vast, so powerful. He'd made the toy cats, the black cats. He was responsible for the vanishings. He could do anything, and yet even he, with all his power, had something he was scared of, something he couldn't face. And faced with Cludge, the gentleman became like a little boy, lost and frightened and all alone. Cludge circled around him, growling and snarling and snapping his teeth. He forced the gentleman over to the broken green window, and then he came at him with big, blunt claws. The gentleman screamed. He turned and ran, out of the window, out of the house. With a wink at the cats, Cludge leaped after him and chased him, screaming, into the night. Okay, the final chapter, chapter 35. The gentleman was gone. A great cheer went up. The cats from the cage came charging downstairs. Varjak Paul slumped to the floor. He should have felt like cheering too, but he didn't. All he wanted was a quiet place to rest. Some chance. "Varjak Paul, you did it," said Julius. Varjak and his friends. They were swamped by admiring green eyes. The Mesopotamian blues swept them up and carried them on their shoulders. Around them, the street cats were taking over the Contessa's house. They were everywhere, celebrating their release, enjoying their freedom. "Thank Jalal, that's over," said Mum above the racket. "Now, how are we going to get back to normal?" "Good thing there's all that dry food," said Father. "It's not caviar, but it'll do." Varjak stared at them, shocked. "You don't want to stay here after everything that's happened?" "We can't go outside," said Father. "This is our home," said Jasmine. "The Contessa's house." "But there's no Contessa anymore," said Varjak. "No more gentlemen. It's just us. We're on our own in the world." He heard a snuffling sound. It was Jay, Jethro, and Jerome. "Don't be scared," he said. "We'll start again. We'll find a new home somewhere, just like Jalal when he left Mesopotamia. Except this time it'll be ours, because we'll make it ourselves." "Varjak Paul!" "Cludge!" The family scurried aside as the colossal dog leaped back through the window. Tam turned to Holly, her eyes wide with wonder. "I don't believe it," she whispered. "He actually talked to a dog. A real, proper dog." "He's called Cludge," said Holly. "He's a friend." Cludge's tail wagged merrily. That cloudy look was completely gone from his eyes. They were the clear as black now, and they sparkled with a new life. "Man gone now," he panted. "Won't come back." Varjak grinned. "You saved us all, Cludge. But how did you climb the wall?" Cludge drew himself up to his full height. "Wall scare Cludge, but friends need Cludge," he shrugged. "So Cludge climb wall." More cheers were going up. Some of the cats from the cage had found the gentleman's caviar. They were feasting like they'd never feasted before. Others were streaming through the shattered green window, returning to their lives outside, as the sun began to rise after the long, dark night. Varjak turned to his family. "That's where I'm going," he said. "That's where I belong." "But you and your friends, you saved us," said Julius. "You're head of the family. You can't go now." Varjak smiled at his brother. "I think maybe it's time there wasn't a head of the family anymore," he said. "There must be a better way of doing things." "Show us, Varjak," said Jasmine. "I'll show you how to hunt, to fight, to live outside, if you come with me." He looked around the family circle. One by one, they all looked down. But he didn't feel alone. He felt free. "Varjak, thank you for saving us," said Father. "You were right about the gentleman. We were wrong about your friends. We were wrong about a lot of things, but we can't come outside with you. Not yet, anyway." "If you ever need us," said Mother, "we'll be here." "I understand," said Varjak, and at that moment, for perhaps the first time in his life, he really did. They said their farewells, and then Varjak turned to Holly and Tam. "So, do you want to be in a gang then?" he said. Tam nodded and grinned. "There's only one gang I want to be in," said Holly, "and that's ours." "Cludge too," barked the big dog. Cludge carried them out. As they went, the friends talked and laughed together about the things they had done and the things they would do. Many of the cats they'd freed from the cage followed them like they were the leaders of a gang. So much lay ahead of them. Anything was possible now. It was a beautiful morning. The earth was decked out in dewdrops. The open air was fresh and clean, and up in the clear blue sky, the sun was rising with the promise of a new day, dawning on the wide world, shining bright and amber, like the eyes of Varjak Paul. And that's the end of our story. Okay. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. We are going to move on this morning. So our learning intention this morning is to be able to empathize with a character in a story. Okay, now when we're talking about empathy, it's almost like you are imagining you are that character. You are putting yourself in that character's position. And what I want you to do is to just look at these two questions on the screen. Who is the hero at the end of the story? And why do you think that? What is it that makes you think that this person or this character is the story? Press pause while you're thinking about the answer to those questions, and press play when you're ready to come back together. Okay, well, some of you might have thought that it's Varjak is the hero at the end of the story. After all, he was the cat who fought the two black cats. He fought with a fury and a power that he'd never had before. But ultimately, Varjak was afraid he was going to get beaten. Some of you might have said Holly is the hero at the end of the story, because it was her that realized that you needed to get rid of the black cat's collars to slow them down, to stop them, to turn them off. So maybe Holly was the hero. Hopefully most of you will probably have said the hero of the tale at the very end of the story was Cludge, the dog, because he had found a way to get inside the house. He'd realized that his friends needed him, and he was ready to lay down his life and fight for his friends. So hopefully you've got something like that one of those three. We're going to be focusing on kludge in the next 2 or 3 days. Okay, so at the beginning then, this morning then, what I want you to think about is, what do you think kludge might have been thinking as he waited outside? So if when kludge was outside the wall and the two cats, Holly and Barjack, had gone over the wall and into the garden, what do you think kludge might have been thinking, and why do you think that? Press pause now while you're thinking. Okay, so why do you think kludge might have been, what do you think kludge might have been thinking as he was waiting outside? I think he would have been feeling quite distraught, quite upset that he wasn't able to help his friends. I think he might have been feeling a little bit angry that he wasn't, that he's a dog and not able to climb walls. And possibly he might have been feeling that actually he'd let Barjack down, that he'd let his friends down. I'm sure you might have some other ideas. Anything that you've thought about so far in this with this question will be really useful to you later on this morning. Okay, next question here. What do you think made kludge decide to climb the wall? And I've got another question underneath there. What might he have seen outside to make him change his mind? What made him decide he was going to have a go at climbing the wall? Press pause while you're thinking about the answer to these questions, and press play when you're ready to carry on. Okay, well, again, I think linking this to the first question, what do you think made kludge decide to climb the wall? I think he plucked up the courage. He thought, right, actually, if the cats can go over the wall, I'm bigger and stronger than the cats. Why can't I climb the wall? And also, I think he just wanted to desperately help his friends. He realised that they could have been in trouble. And I've got it underneath here, which probably would have fit in with that. What might he have seen outside to make him change his mind? Now, we don't know. This is something that I'm putting in that maybe could have happened, might not have happened. Maybe it might have. That maybe kludge would have seen the gentleman arrive at the house. If we don't think that the gentleman was inside when Barjack and Holly first got in, or the cats, because they were nowhere to be seen, maybe they'd been away and they'd come back. Maybe seen kludge. Maybe kludge had seen the gentleman, seen how big he was, seen the two black cats, and he knew who they were because Barjack had described them. And so maybe that would have been enough, that he looked at them and probably thought, my friends are really in trouble here. They could really use my help. So maybe that was what he saw to make him change his mind. Okay, so what we're going to be doing as the week progresses, we are going to be writing the end of the story from kludge's point of view. So we are only going to be thinking about the things that kludge has either thought or felt or seen, to write what the story, how the story might have ended from his perspective, from his point of view. Now, this morning, what I'm going to ask you to do, I want you to look at this sheet. Okay. I want you to complete the thought bubbles. So I want you to think, what might be going through kludge's mind? How might he have been feeling? Okay. Now, you might not fill up all of these bubbles this morning, but I've put quite a few in there just in case you have. All right. So, what's going through kludge's mind? Should he help Barjack? What could he do? Is he going to climb the wall? Is he going to try and get in through the door? Is there any other way inside that he's able to get in there? So, he could be looking, you could really be putting yourself in kludge's position this morning. All those thoughts and feelings. How's he feeling? He's feeling maybe angry that he can't help Barjack, that he's not able to climb the wall. He could be feeling like quite sad that they're his friends and he should be there for them. All of those things that we've talked about already. I want you to try and fill up your thought bubbles with those, and just try and explain your choices. There's enough room in the thought bubbles for you to be able to explain those choices as well. So press pause while you're working and press play when you're ready to come back together. Now, hopefully, you've been able to include lots of thoughts and feelings. Hopefully, you've thought about how he might feel outside the wall. Hopefully, you might have even thought about what he might have been feeling as he was climbing the wall. How might he have felt when he reached the top of the wall? And what makes him jump through the window? Now, if you haven't included these, maybe you could, and you've got some empty bubbles, maybe you could go back and finish those off for me. Okay, have a little thought about how he might be feeling for each of these if you haven't included them already. And finally this morning, our plenary. Now, you've got thought bubbles which tell you how Cludge is feeling. What I want to try and do now, maybe around the outside, so not inside the bubbles, but on the outside, maybe you could perhaps find some descriptive words that could describe the different settings or places that Cludge could encounter. So, for example, he might be stood in front of the towering slate grey wall. He might, as he's climbing, he might find crumbling bricks jutting out to make footholds, things that help him to climb. That maybe when he stood in the garden, he might be looking at the murky, grimy windows through which he can see Varjak being held up by the gentleman. So just have a little think, think about all the different places that Cludge might be as he's heading inside to the window, to the ultimate climax of the story. Can you describe anything? Can you put some expanded noun phrases? Could you get some similes in there? Anything you could think of that might just be, you could just put around the outside. Any of these things will help you as the week goes on. So once you've done that, it will be the end of the lesson. Have a lovely day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.